Happy Mother's Day.
That's so horrible. Hello, welcome to my channel. My name is Emily, and if you've been here before, you know that I make sewing videos. Well, this week being Mother's Day weekend, I thought I would do something a little bit different and invite my mom to come as a guest on my channel. So everyone welcome my mom, Jean. So what I wanted to do for this video was to kind of celebrate the special relationship that mothers and daughters can have through their sewing and through their creative projects. And so I thought it would be a fun idea if my mom and I both answer some questions about sewing and see how our answers are different and see how that brings us together. So my first question for you is, how old were you when you started sewing?
I was about 12 because I was in 7th grade. I remember when I started to sew. We had a sewing machine that nobody was using, and I just went for it.
Okay. That's funny because I didn't know that about you, that you started so young. I don't think I've ever asked that.
Really? We never had that conversation before.
I don't think so.
Yeah, well, I don't know.
Did Grandma sew?
Go ahead.
Did your mom sew?
No, that's interesting because her mother sewed and was a wonderful seamstress. Made all of their clothes and, made her own patterns and that kind of stuff. And then it skipped a generation because my mom had no interest in sewing. Like having to hem a skirt was like,
she was
just a terrible. No, I don't want to do that.
But it's funny because I think I maybe have inherited that from her because I do not hem my own clothes. Like pants, skirts, nothing. Like if it's not like a fun project, I don't want to do it.
You don't want to do it.
Yeah.
Well, that is true. There for a while I thought the whole sewing thing and skipping a generation was going to be a thing in our family. But here you are.
Here I am. Now I sew. I started sewing when I was pretty young. I think I was 7 or 8. Do you remember when I got the Felicity American Girl doll for Christmas one year?
I think I do remember that, yes.
Yeah, of course you remember that. How could you not?
How could I not remember that?
Yeah, and so she came with her outfit, which was an 18th century outfit, funnily enough, which is the project that I started this channel to document, was me making my now grown up version 18th century outfit.
There you go.
But
so you had that.
Yeah, I like that aesthetic. You think?
That's what I was going to say.
Yeah.
That sounds like you.
Me.
Yes.
Yeah, so she came with her outfit and everything, but I think it didn't have an apron, and, I wanted her to have an apron. And so you, I think, made an apron for her, and it was smocked. It had a band on the top that was a smocked portion.
Oh.
And you taught me how to hand embroider on the smocking part.
Oh.
Yeah.
I don't remember that.
Yeah, I'm curious to know how you remember this happening, because the way that I remember it happening was you trying to teach me how to sew, and I was interested in it because I thought it was cool. I liked that you sewed, and I thought all the things you made were really pretty, and I wanted to be able to do that. But I just remember I got very bored. I felt like it took forever to you get out the pattern and then read this whole pattern it's like a book. I mean and I just remember getting too bored with the process. I just wanted to start doing things right. I didn't want to have to read the entire pattern. And I think that still holds true in my process today. I do a lot of things on the fly. I mean, I do some preparation.
You do?
Yeah. I do some preparation and reading and research and stuff, but I am not a pattern follower. There's a point where I'm okay, I get the general idea, and I start it and sort of like finesse things as I go.
Yeah, I can remember when you were doing the costuming stuff, and you would just like, you know, take a pair of scissors and cut away, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I couldn't do that. That's just so not me.
The reason that I started sewing in college, and this is perfect because our next question is, why did you start sewing? So the reason that I started sewing in college was because I had some friends who were going to go to Dragon Con, which is this convention that happens in Atlanta every year, kind of similar to like a Comic Con, but kind of, I don't know if you want to say like broader in scope as far as the fandoms that are included, and definitely has more of like a base in the like fantasy realms rather than comic book stuff. So I had some friends that were going to that, and I had heard of it before, had never been, and I really wanted to go with them, and I really wanted to dress up. And so yeah, I was like, oh well, I'm gonna get into cosplay. And the first thing that I did for the first year was a character called Malin from the Zelda Ocarina of Time video game, and she's, you know, kind of like a side character, but I always liked her playing the video game. And that one I think wasn't as involved as the one that I think you're thinking of.
Right, yeah.
Yeah, so the Malin one, like I did some embroidery on a shirt that I just bought the shirt. You actually made the skirt. Yeah, you did like most of the sewing work for that project actually. But yeah, then the next year I did a character from a book by Tamara Pierce. And shoot, what is the name of that book? It's on the bookshelf behind me. So the character was Dane Sarasri from the Wild Mage series by Tamara Pierce. And it's the cover of, I think, the third book, and it's like a purple gown with a golden silk overrobe that's like all embroidered in beads and stuff. And yeah, that I was very intimidated at that time by the thought of using the sewing machine. And so even though I had your sewing machine and I had started out like trying to teach myself how to use it, I was just very intimidated by it. And so I decided that I was going to hand stitch basically two gowns and like hand embroider beads all over it. And I didn't have a pattern that I was using, so I completely made up the pattern. I had like a t-shirt that fit me really well, and I just traced that on the floor and just kind of like made the skirt part of it and the sleeves part of it. Yeah, I completely winged that project.
You did. You did a great job, but I just kept thinking, oh my gosh, she's doing this all by hand. I can't believe she's sewing by hand.
It took forever.
It did take forever.
So many seams in that dress, like, and I'm not very proud of that. I mean, the stitches are like super long, like they're not, you know.
Hey, you got the job done for somebody who didn't have a lot of experience. I thought it was wonderful, and the embroidery was great on it.
I am really proud of the embroidery, the beadwork, yeah, because yeah, I made up like the designs of like characters. She's a mage, and her magic power is all around animals, and so yeah, I had like these different medallions that were each a different animal that I put like spaced out on her dress, and then they were all connected with like flowy, flowery, ropey stuff, and it was all yeah, like this little tiny seed bead embroidered. So yeah, I'm very proud of the embroidery. So I guess we've already kind of talked about what my first project was and why I started sewing, but why did you at the age of 12 decide to start sewing?
You know, I don't really know why I started. We had a machine that I have a sister that's 8 years older than me, and she took home ec, and my mom thought it would be a wonderful thing if she learned how to sew. So
she was like, you can do all this stuff for me.
Exactly. You can start having my pants and my skirts. So you know, she bought a sewing machine, and you know, Anne got married and moved out, obviously, but she didn't take the machine with her right away. It was always at our house. So I just had an interest in it. I don't know why, but I did. So I experimented with it and sort of taught myself how to sew, got patterns, and went to town, I guess.
And so, what was your first project?
The first project that I remember, whether it really was, but the first one is I made a two-piece swimsuit, and I picked out the material and the fabric and all, or I guess that's the same thing, the pattern and the material, and probably in retrospect not the greatest choice because it was terry cloth. So, you know what happens to terry cloth when you get it wet. It was a swimming, yeah. But, you know, live and learn. I remember doing that. And then
Well, that was a very... So, I don't know terry cloth, but knits in general, like early 20th century, I think a lot of women's swimwear, or swimwear in general, like in the 1920s and 30s, I think was, like, I don't know if it was terry cloth specifically, but... knits, where like have you ever seen like the vintage photos of like people on the beach and you look at it now and you're just like, like
yeah, that's true.
How like horribly unflattering, and what do they do when it gets wet? But like it might have just been more normal then.
Are you implying that I was 12 years old in the
No. I'm just saying it's not like outside of the realm of like normal swimsuit fabrics.
Well, for when I was 12, it was probably
In
outside
history.
of the dorm. But you know, I mean, that's what happens when you're 12 and you go and you see you see something you like and you buy it, and you don't think of, you know, down the road. How much I even wore that swimsuit, I have no idea, because it's not like we lived on a lake, we didn't have a pool. I probably, you know, just ran around the neighborhood in it or something. I don't know.
What was your latest project, the most recent thing that you've worked on?
So my latest project is this. I don't know. And I just love this material when I saw it in the store maybe 2 or 3 years ago, and decided to buy it, and not knowing what I was going to do with it, but it turned out to be, I think, really pretty, nice, bright and cheerful.
Yeah, I think so.
And
most of your quilts, you do like the bright, like cheerful colors. And
I do.
Kind of like, would you say more modern or contemporary looking quilts?
I think so. More modern, more contemporary. I have the quilt that took me over a year to do here. Do you want to see that one? So this is, and I think this is more in that more modern, contemporary vein.
Yeah, and I don't really know that much about quilts. About like I can tell the difference between one that's super traditional,
Right,
versus like modern, but I don't really know the nuances of the different styles.
So this one I said took me over a year, and that's because I followed. There's the other side. You know, it's big. It's a bed-sized quilt, which, you know, can't see here, but a lot of the fabric designers will have free patterns or maybe sew-alongs, and this one was a different block. They gave you instructions for a different block every week of the year. So there's 52 blocks in the quilt, and so you get the pattern online, and then pick out your fabric and, you know, do it that way. So it took a year because it, you know, was over the course.
Yeah, you're like
waiting
for the next one to come out.
Yes.
So, and that's, a lot of your projects are like that, right? Like, maybe not every week, but you'll participate in like block of the months, right? Where you do one block every month.
Right. Yeah. That I've done quite a number of those. They're fun to do. Or you just, you know, find a pattern. Or right now I have a software, design software, so I can make up my own patterns. I mean, once you start quilting,
I didn't know that you did that.
you didn't see.
I mean, I've seen that software and I've seen you be manipulating stuff, but I guess I always thought that it was like I've seen you take in a pattern that someone else created and kind of like play around with the colors to see what different color schemes would look like. But yeah, I didn't realize that you like made your own patterns as well.
Yeah, you can do that.
So my latest project is my 18th century gown project, which is ongoing, and that's kind of like the overarching project, but there's so many like little different components to it, and so if you want to like break down what the project within the project, I think the most recent thing that I have done is my petticoats. So, basically like a series of skirts that you wear underneath the gown. And I think that will probably be my next video that goes out after this one. Will be all about how I made the different petticoats and why they're different from one another, and all of that.
Well, that'd be interesting. I didn't realize that petticoats were different colors. I learned that.
Yeah.
From talking to you,
I mean,
guess.
they don't.
I don't know if that's
they don't
been in
have
one of
to
your
be
videos, but yeah.
I don't think that I've talked about petticoats yet.
Okay.
And yeah, I don't want to go like too much into it, because I do talk about it in the next video. But yeah, petticoats are different. There's lots of different types of petticoats, and used for different purposes.
Who knew?
They vary, throughout time, right? So
Right.
yeah, and it was cool, like getting to learn about those differences and the different construction methods between each of them. What project are you most proud of?
Ooh. Most proud of.
I know, it's a good one.
Well, I am pretty proud of the smock dresses that I made for you when you were little, because that was that was like something that I never had as a child, and smocking was like a new thing for me, and I just thought it was so cool to make smock dresses, and I made some smocked baby bonnets that I gave away as gifts. So, I think maybe smocking. I don't know. That's a tough one.
Yeah. Well, and it's tough because like you have different categories of things that you've made, and so it's like, well, most proud of overall, or like most proud of like within each category. Yeah.
Yeah, that is true. I mean, because then I think of home decor, and I could talk about that, but we already decided that was boring. So
we already decided we don't like sewing home decor stuff.
So whatever. Okay.
Sorry to everyone out there who's really into home decor sewing. No, we don't like that.
So, what are you most proud of?
I will have to definitely say my 18th century stays.
Yeah.
Because for a couple of reasons. One, like making stays or corsets is like very intimidating. It just seems like something that would be so difficult to do. And what I found was that it's not as difficult as you think, but it still like requires a lot of skill and patience, trial and error, to do. And then I'm proud of them because they turned out really well. It was something that I went into like knowing that I needed to do it for this 18th century project, but it goes underneath all the clothes, so it's not like the star of the show in the end.
Right.
And it was just kind of like a necessary evil kind of thing. And I went into it kind of thinking like, okay, I'm gonna have to make these, but kind of was thinking that they probably wouldn't turn out that great, that they would turn out okay. And they actually turned out really, really good. Like there's things to improve upon next time for sure, but overall, like the fit is really nice. They're comfortable. I think they look pretty. Like, I'm really happy with how they turned out, and I'm really proud of them.
I think you should be.
How do you choose what to work on?
Well, lots of times I'm just inspired by the fabric. When you're in the quilting world, people will talk about their stash of fabric, which just means
We have that in the costuming
Do you
world,
have that too? Okay.
I think that might be a universal sewist thing.
And you go into a fabric store and you see something you like, and for me I see the material and I go, oh my gosh, I just have to buy it. Like that first quilt that I showed, I had no idea what I was going to make with it, but I just bought it because I just had to buy it, and then I find something. So a lot of it is inspired by the fabric or the material, and then sometimes you just see a really cool pattern, something with a different technique that you want to try, that it will, it's just something that you haven't tried before. So it just sort of depends.
This is something that I struggle with a lot, because I have like too many ideas and too many things that I want to make.
Right.
And so like actually nailing down like, okay, this is the project that I'm doing right now, and I'm gonna follow through on it. But the way that I decided to do the 18th century project and actually like got enough momentum to start on it was I found the Guide to 18th Century Dressmaking book by American Duchess.
You've shown me.
Yeah. And so it was like, I've showed it to you.
Yeah.
And so that provided like, it took away some of the intimidation factor, because I've wanted to get into historical costuming before, but there's so many different elements to it, all the undergarments, and just like there's so much to it, right? And it can be very intimidating to start. And so having that book as like a starting point to say, okay, here's everything that you need to complete this project, that really helped me. So that's how I chose 18th century, was because it had such a great resource for like the entry point. Do you have any favorite tools or notions that you use?
For quilt making, these are like required. A rotary cutter, which is so different than what you use for sewing, clothes sewing with a pair of scissors, and then the ruler. So these are like the basics, and without a rotary cutter and good rulers, quilting would be very difficult. It would be very laborious.
So you have rulers like that you use with the rotary cutter, and then don't you also have like a lot of rulers that you use with the quilting machine to actually like do the top stitching, the actual quilting part, like in different patterns, right?
Right, yeah. These rulers are like 1/4 of an inch thick, because that's all you need to have the rotary cutter up against to cut the material. But in the other ones, you can't use these on a long arm quilting machine. You have to have thicker rulers.
Your ruler collection is impressive. Like, let me just say the amount of different types of rulers that you have. True. Like, I did not know they made that many different kinds of rulers.
Yeah, that's a slippery slope of buying. You see,
like you use it one time for one project kind of thing.
Some rulers are like that, yes.
My favorite tool or notion is my new bootstrap fashion dress form that I made for myself. And I do have a video on my channel about making that. But it's by far the coolest sewing tool that I've ever had. It's like a copy of my body in a dress form. Because I can remember, trying to use like, I'm going to say off the rack dress form, or standard might be a better word. Standard dress form, yeah. And they just, they're too far away from what my body shape is to really be useful in making things for myself.
Right. I think that you will find that it is very helpful.
So far, it has been so much easier to use the dress form that is mostly shaped like me than to try and like modify a pattern down to my height. Like, it's been faster, easier, simpler. Okay, so last question.
Okay.
What would you like to make or do, like a new technique or something that you have not done yet?
So I have wanted to do, it's called a Bargello quilt, and what
Sounds very fancy.
It is. It's lots of pieces that where the color changes. So,
Like kind of like ombre?
Right, exactly. And
Okay.
it can be, but so it's more difficult because you're changing color, and you have all those little pieces that have to go together and match up the seams, and I just think it's a really cool looking quilt when it's all done. So I sort of want to do one of those.
Well, when you do it and when you have it done, I'm going to have you back on the channel to show it off.
Okay, all right. Well,
so there, now you have to do it.
now I have to do it. There's the challenge, right?
Yeah.
So now what color should I do it in? Oh, now the fun begins.
Decisions.
Decisions, yes. What do you want to do?
What I want to start getting into is 1910s, or like Titanic era, kind of.
Right. That's like so different from what you're doing now with the petticoats and the big skirts and that. Yeah.
Very different style and silhouette. I really like the fashion from that era. I think
I
like
do
initially I got interested in it like from the movie Titanic. Watched that as a kid. I mean, like every outfit in that is just like
gorgeous.
Absolutely beautiful. And also, like I want to be Rose. She was like the epitome of beauty growing up. Oh, I just thought she was the most beautiful thing I had ever seen. Like, so of course I want to, make her outfits and be Rose.
Of course, yes.
So yeah, but that's, that's 1912. And what's really interesting about the 1910s is how much the fashion changes throughout the decade. So like the 1912 true Titanic era stuff is really gorgeous, and I want to make like everything from that movie and, other historical things and all that. But then also, like, as you move later into the century, the silhouette really starts to change, and like without going into it too much, like it becomes a little bit fuller in the skirt. And so I think you can start seeing like the shift from like the Edwardian era of like the S-bend corsets and super long skirts, and that shift into like the classic 1920s style where you start everything gets looser. The waists drop and all that, and so it's really cool to like see a period in fashion history where that shift in style happens.
So do you think that shift is like gradual? Because I know, like, I think of like the Titanic style and then the 20s, like it goes from one to the other, but you're saying that there's more in between that?
Yeah, there's definitely more in between. I mean, because that's like Titanic is 1912, and then what we think of as typical 1920s, it's not like the year 1920 hit and then like immediately it's what we think of as the iconic 1920s.
Okay,
I think,
so
and yeah, like I'm not an expert on this, right? But I think that like if you're thinking of very iconic 1920s, it's probably more like 1925, 1926, kind of, maybe even later in the 20s. So yeah, it's a period of like 10 to 15 years where that shift happens. So thank you, Mom, for joining me today and agreeing to be on my channel. I really enjoyed the conversation that we had today. I think I learned a lot about you and about why you started sewing. You know, of course, I knew some of it because we do talk about this stuff, but I think I learned stuff, you know, that I didn't know. And it was just really nice to have a Mother's Day conversation and get to bond over sewing.
I think it went well. Thank you for having me. I have to say I was a little apprehensive at first, but it was a lot of fun. It really was a lot of fun. So
I'm glad you had fun.
Yeah.
I hope that you enjoyed watching this video, and I hope that you can bond with your mom or with your daughter on Mother's Day the same way that we have.